Silence is no longer the absence of sound. It is a weapon, a perimeter, and the final barrier between your pulse and whatever hunts it. After the collapse, the world shifts its physics. Noise becomes a broadcast of your coordinates, a confession of your direction, a surrender of your intent. Every broken twig, every loose stone, every uncontrolled exhale becomes an invitation for predators, human or otherwise, to converge on you with mathematical certainty. Movement is no longer about speed. It is about non-existence. The smart dive first because they believe they can outrun danger. The disciplined survive because they refuse to be detected by it. What was once an open landscape is now a hostile acoustic grid where sound carries farther, clearer, and deadlier through abandoned structures, hollowed roads, fractured forests, and skeletal cities. Nothing absorbs noise anymore. Everything amplifies it. This new world does not reward those who think they are careful. It rewards those who become ghosts by design. Stealth is not a trick. It is an operating system. It rewrites your posture, rewires your breath, and reprograms your instincts. The tools you carry are not gadgets. They are silencers of your biological flaws. They compensate for the vulnerabilities your body refuses to acknowledge. They eliminate the confident mistakes that used to be harmless, but now will get you erased. You do not walk. You calculate each point of contact with the ground. You do not breathe. You measure every exhale like rationed fuel. You do not exist. You allow your environment to forget that you ever passed through it. The hostile zone doesn't care if you mean well. It only cares if it hears you. In this world, silence is not golden. It is bloodless. And your first mission is to master it before nightfall turns every sound you make into a death sentence. The Soft Step Soul system is not footwear. It is an erasure protocol engineered to remove your acoustic footprint from the hostile zone. In the post-collapse world, the ground is no longer a passive surface. It is an informant. Rubble, shattered glass, splintered wood, warped metal, loose gravel, desiccated foliage. Each is a sensor waiting to broadcast your presence to anything predatory within a 200-meter radius. Movement without modification is suicide. The human foot, even trained, is too heavy, too imprecise, too loud. The Soft Step Soul system exists to correct this biological flaw. Its design principle is simple: expand contact, distribute weight, and absorb impact before the environment registers it. But its execution is ruthless. A multi-layered sole, soft exterior, firm interior, dampens the micro vibrations that normally ripple into the terrain. It eliminates the sharp signatures created by standard boots, which punch into debris fields and trigger chain reactions of sound. The system forces you to adopt a low-pressure gait, where heel, mid-step, and forefoot operate as a single fluid motion, rather than three separate impacts. This is not walking. This is controlled descent with each step, transferring only the minimum force required to avoid collapse. The true failure point is not the soul. It is the operator. People raised in the old world walk with certainty because the ground used to be trustworthy. That confidence becomes lethal after the collapse. The system requires you to override that instinct and treat every square inch of terrain as a potential sonic trap. You learn to scan the ground the way a bomb technician scans a device. Not for danger you see, but for danger you will trigger. Your foot must become a probe, not a weight. Your step must be a whisper, not a declaration. Even your pauses matter. Freezing too quickly generates sudden tension, and tension transmits vibration. The Soft Step Soul system demands fluid continuity. No jolts, no shifts, no abrupt transfers of force. In darkness, it becomes even more vital. You cannot rely on your eyes. You rely on the soul's feedback, its muted conversation with the terrain, its warnings through pressure resistance and subtle drag. When used correctly, it lets you glide through broken urban skeletons, collapsed hallways, unstable forest floors, and debris-thick alleys without waking the environment. When used incorrectly, it amplifies your mistakes by exposing the gap between what you think is quiet and what the world actually hears. With this system, silence isn't a suggestion. It is an enforced discipline. The ground stops reporting you only when you stop assuming it won't. The dead air cloak is not clothing. It is a mobile acoustic void built to absorb the sounds your body cannot prevent. In a hostile post-collapse zone, your threat signature is not defined only by footsteps. The environment exposes you in dozens of ways you never considered in the old world. Fabric brushing against broken concrete, loose gear scraping your back, your silhouette snagging on metal rebar, your shoulder sliding against a cracked doorway, your outline shifting just enough to trigger peripheral detection. The dead air cloak eliminates these betrayals by turning your presence into a muted distortion that the environment cannot interpret. Its power lies in the physics of stillness. Layers of staggered fabric create micro-pockets of trapped air, dead air, that swallow friction before it radiates outward. Every movement you make creates micro-turbulence, and micro-turbulence creates sound. The cloak eats that sound whole. It prevents sharp edges of noise from escaping into open space, allowing you to move through brush, collapsed interiors, and narrow concrete corridors without generating the telltale rustle that predators use to triangulate position. In a world where silence is not natural, the cloak manufactures it. Most survivors misunderstand stealth. They believe stillness is enough. They believe slow equals quiet. They are wrong. Slow movement on abrasive surfaces still generates continuous friction, and continuous friction travels farther than they expect. The dead air cloak is engineered to interfere with that transmission. Its outer layer creates a broken topography that scatters sound waves rather than letting them ping cleanly off your silhouette. This distortion prevents observers from registering you as a coherent moving form. You do not simply blend in, you fragment. Your outline dissolves into the background's irregular geometry, making it nearly impossible for a watcher to distinguish motion from environmental noise. But the cloak demands respect. If you treat it like a garment, it will betray you. You must learn to move with its logic. The cloak rewards gliding, not shifting. It rewards narrow turns, not sudden pivots. It rewards patience, not panic. The operator must adopt a posture of controlled minimalism. Elbows tight, shoulders low, head aligned with forward momentum. Any unnecessary motion becomes a sound spike that even the cloak cannot smother. Its greatest advantage emerges in vegetation or interior ruins, where every surface is an acoustic tripwire. Branches scrape, debris clings, jagged edges grab. The cloak creates a buffer zone, a silent perimeter around your body, reducing contact to cushioned impacts rather than sharp collisions. As you move, the world loses its leverage against you. It can no longer scream your position through involuntary noise. When used properly, the dead air cloak does more than conceal your sound. It erases your identity as a moving object. You become a drifting anomaly, a muted distortion slipping through a landscape that can no longer recognize you as human prey. In a world built on detection, that confusion is survival. The breath control mask is not a filter. It is a regulator of your most primitive betrayal, the sound of your own survival. Breath is the rhythm that exposes you when everything else is silent. In a post-collapse zone, it becomes a beacon. Stress sharpens it, fear accelerates it, fatigue roughens it, and the hostile world around you, hollow buildings, broken corridors, abandoned tunnels, wide forest clearings, amplifies every exhale into something larger, something traceable, something fatal. You cannot negotiate with your biology. You override it, or it turns you into a target. The mask enforces discipline by compressing and channeling your airflow, slowing your exhalations even when your heart demands the opposite. Under duress, the human body shifts into panic respiration, short, harsh bursts that whistle through the throat and ricochet off the teeth. These micro whistles travel farther than footsteps on gravel. They betray distance, direction, and emotional state. The breath control mask eliminates the whistle by forcing air through layered chambers that break the stream, soften its edges, and disperse its signature into a low, indistinct thrum that dies before reaching open space. But equipment alone is insufficient. The operator must confront the uncomfortable truth that breath is controllable only when the mind refuses to panic. The mask exposes your errors brutally. If you inhale too sharply, the intake pressure spikes. If you exhale too fast, the chambers push back with resistance. You learn to harmonize with it the way divers harmonize with depth. Slow in, slower out, no interruptions, no hard starts, no jagged releases. Breathing becomes a measured sequence rather than an autonomous reflex. You are no longer a creature reacting to stress. You are a machine executing a controlled cycle. The real danger emerges during movement after exertion. Most survivors make the same confident mistake. They try to move silently while still breathing like prey. The mask prevents this weakness by forcing you to pace yourself around your respiratory discipline. You stop when the mask tells you to stop. You advance only when the breath has returned to operational quiet. Stealth is not momentum. Stealth is synchronization. Your heartbeat, your breath, your footfall. 3 signals that must collapse into one continuous silence. In enclosed structures, the mask's value is absolute. Stairwells act like megaphones. Hallways create directional tunnels. Basements amplify every sound through stagnant air. Without breath discipline, you announce your approach long before you understand what waits in the dark. The mask denies the environment this advantage. It breaks your breath into fragments too soft to travel and too scattered to be interpreted. And when fear surges, when something shifts in the distance, when metal falls somewhere unseen, when a presence breathes back at you, the mask forces you to remain in control. Panic without noise becomes survivable. Panic with sound becomes a death sentence. The breath control mask is more than a tool. It is a contract. You agree to master your own biology, and in return, it keeps you invisible. The world hears nothing. The predators detect nothing. Only your pulse knows you are there. The frictionless carry system is the difference between a survivor who moves with intent and one who drags their death behind them with every step. After the collapse, the human loadout becomes the loudest part of the human body. Every strap shift, every metal click, every unsecured tool rattle becomes a declaration of position in a world where silence is the only remaining camouflage. People who once trusted their gear now die because of it. The environment amplifies everything you carry. And predators have learned to distinguish the sound of equipment from the sound of nature. Your loadout is either silent or it is a beacon. The system begins by eliminating all points of contact that generate friction, but its philosophy runs deeper. It forces you to abandon the old world fantasy that you can carry everything you want. Only what can be silenced is what can be used. The straps are layered with compressive padding, designed to clamp down on micro movements before they evolve into noise. The contact surfaces mimic skin tension, gripping the body without slipping, distributing the load so evenly that inertia never has space to ignite a sound. You do not feel the bag shift because it does not shift. You do not hear the tools inside because they are individually isolated in suspended pockets, engineered to prevent collision. Most survivors make the same fatal mistake. They tighten their pack only once. They assume their initial configuration will hold. It never does. Movement changes geometry. Weight distribution changes posture. Heat changes strap tension. The frictionless carry system requires constant micro-adjustments. Silent operators learn to recalibrate on the move, feeling for subtle shifts that would otherwise become catastrophic noise spikes. A loose buckle in a narrow hallway becomes an echoing ping that rolls through concrete like a dropped coin. A knife sheath rubbing against the pack becomes a scraping signature predators can follow for minutes. A dangling cord across the chest becomes a repetitive tap that marks you with mechanical precision. The interior of the system is a discipline of its own. Every item is placed according to the law of acoustic isolation. Lighter tools ride high where movement is minimal. Dense items ride low where momentum carries them less. Nothing touches anything else. Nothing swings. Nothing slides. Nothing knocks. The operator memorizes where each item rests, retrieving gear with blind precision so hands never fumble, never search, never disrupt the equilibrium of silence. This system also rewrites how you move. You stop using your arms as counterweights because that motion can collide with straps. You pivot with your hips, not your shoulders, because shoulder twists shift the harness. You kneel in a single controlled axis because dropping to one knee too quickly snaps the pack downward with audible force. Every motion becomes a study in stability. No sudden angles, no uncontrolled drops, no lazy posture. In debris-heavy zones, the carry system becomes a shield against your own inertia. When you crawl, it clings to your spine. When you climb, it compresses the load closer to your center of gravity. When you lean, it stiffens to prevent gear drift. The system predicts your movements, reducing the chaotic variability that noise thrives on. Master this, and your loadout stops betraying you. Fail, and your equipment becomes louder than your breath, louder than your steps, louder than your intentions. In the post-apocalyptic world, sound does not forgive. The only acceptable carry system is one that the environment never notices. The Shadowline Signal Dampener is not a tool you carry for yourself. It is a tool you use to silence the world before it has the chance to expose you. In the post-collapse environment, danger does not come only from what moves. It comes from what shifts when you move. Hanging metal signs sway in the wind. Loose pipes vibrate when touched. Shattered shelves tilt under the weight of a single footstep. Glass fragments slide into deeper piles. Every abandoned structure has become a dormant alarm system waiting for the slightest disturbance to trigger a cascade of sound that announces your presence across the ruins. You are not just avoiding noise. You are navigating through a landscape wired to betray you. The Shadowline Signal Dampener neutralizes these environmental threats by immobilizing the objects that would otherwise broadcast your path. It is a flexible, high-tension strip that anchors unstable surfaces into temporary stillness. You place it across a rattling door hinge, a loose metal grate, a suspended pipe, a brittle piece of collapsed drywall. The moment it binds, the vibration dies. The environment stops listening to itself. Silence becomes deliberate, engineered, controlled. Amateurs believe stealth means tiptoeing through danger. Professionals know that tiptoeing is worthless if the world shifts behind them. Even one object knocked out of balance will continue to rock, scrape, or clatter long after they've passed. This lingering signature is fatal. Predators do not need to see you. They only need to hear where you were. And because most survivors think silence is the absence of noise, at the moment they move, they ignore the aftermath. The Shadowline dampener exists to eliminate that aftermath entirely. The discipline begins with environmental scanning. Every location becomes a diagnosis. You do not ask, "Can I pass quietly?" You ask, "What will still be making noise after I pass?" You track suspended objects, unstable debris, friction points, and loose structures. You visualize their trajectories, the arc of their sway, the angle of their collapse. The dampener allows you to interfere with these trajectories, freezing them long enough for you to slip by without activating the acoustic chain reactions that predators rely on. But the tool demands precision. If you anchor the wrong point, the structure may settle with a sharp snap. If you pull the tension unevenly, you may cause vibration instead of eliminating it. You learn to place the dampener with the delicacy of a surgeon, using minimal pressure to create maximal control. The goal is not to force the object into rigidity, but to remove just enough freedom that it can no longer resonate. A silent environment is not created through strength. It is created through calculated restraint. In narrow corridors, the dampener becomes indispensable. A single, loose vent panel can ring like a bell. A dangling cable can slap against a wall. A cracked tile can seesaw under shifting air pressure. You secure them one by one, learning the rhythm of the environment until the corridor becomes inert. You move through a dead zone you engineered yourself. In outdoor ruins, wind becomes your enemy. A gust hitting unstable debris can reveal your location even when you are perfectly silent. The dampener stops the wind from weaponizing the environment against you. By locking objects into stillness, you deny the landscape its voice. When used correctly, the Shadowline signal dampener gives you the rarest advantage in the post-apocalyptic world, a corridor of absolute engineered quiet. You leave nothing moving. You leave nothing echoing. You leave nothing behind that can be traced. The environment forgets you as soon as you pass, and that forgetfulness becomes your most reliable form of camouflage. The silent terrain probe is not a walking stick. It is an extension of your awareness, a perimeter sensor, and the only negotiator you have with terrain that wants to expose you. In the hostile post-collapse world, the ground is the most unpredictable threat vector. It is layered with instability, loose debris fields, hollow flooring, ash pockets, waterlogged soil, corroded metal sheets, collapsed stairwells, camouflage drop-offs, and fractured concrete slabs suspended over empty air. One misplaced step does not just risk a fall, it risks a sound eruption that detonates through the environment like a flare. Survivors are not lost because they trip. They are lost because the world hears them trip. The silent terrain probe prevents this by converting movement into reconnaissance. Its soft, rubberized tip compresses rather than strikes, allowing you to test the surface ahead without producing a detectable tap. The shaft is engineered for vibration damping, ensuring that even a sudden jolt is absorbed instead of transmitted. Every contact point becomes a question. Will this hold? Will it shift? Will it echo? The probe answers before your foot commits. Amateurs advance by sight. Professionals advance by physics. Vision is unreliable in darkness, fog, dense vegetation, collapsing interiors, and moonless ruins where shadows swallow detail. The probe restores certainty. You sweep it gently along the surface, feeling for micro-give, listening for muted resistance, analyzing how material bends under pressure. The silent operator learns to interpret this feedback as a second language. A slight flex indicates hidden voids beneath a seemingly solid surface. A dampened bounce suggests water saturation. A dragging sensation reveals loose rubble. A rubbery pushback hints at vegetation-covered traps. Eyes can be deceived. Mechanical feedback cannot. But the terrain probe is not simply a detector. It is a tempo regulator. It forces you to move at a pace that prevents breath, gear, and footfall from spiraling into chaos. Silent movement exists only when the operator controls the pace, and the probe becomes the metronome. Each soft press into the ground becomes a mandate. Proceed, adjust, or stop entirely. It disciplines the impulsive survivor who tries to advance too quickly, reminding them that haste is the enemy of silence, and silence is the last defense against ambush. In vertical movement, the probe becomes indispensable. Climbing through broken stairwells or collapsed roofs requires knowing which surfaces can bear weight and which will shatter under minimal force. The probe's reach gives you distance that protects your center of mass from overcommitting. You learn to shift your weight only after the probe confirms stability. Even in crawling or crouched movement, the probe stays active, mapping ahead to prevent elbows, knees, or pack edges from contacting unstable debris. Its true power emerges in complete darkness. When visibility drops to zero, whether by nightfall, smoke, power outage, or underground passage, the probe becomes your only interface with the world. You convert yourself into a silent, tactile machine. Probe, shift, glide, pause. Your feet stop leading. Your hands become the forward reconnaissance unit. The environment no longer surprises you because the probe has already interrogated it. Most survivors underestimate how often terrain noise kills. A single sliding stone can echo through an empty structure for 20 seconds. A collapsing tile can trigger an entire chain of falling debris. A hidden puddle can splash loud enough to carry across a ruined neighborhood. The silent terrain probe exists to eliminate every one of these risks before they occur. It is proactive silence, not reactive silence. Use it correctly, and you stop gambling your life on the promise that the next step will be safe. You turn uncertainty into calculated movement. You turn the unknown floor into readable data. And in a world where the ground itself has become a traitor, the probe becomes the only negotiator that never lies. The Noise Harvest listening stick is not a microphone, not a sensor, not a weapon. It is an extension of your nervous system, a device that steals sound from the environment before the environment uses it against you. In the post-collapse world, the most dangerous thing you can do is move before you understand what already moves around you. Silence is not an achievement. It is a vulnerability. When you are quiet, you hear nothing of yourself, but everything else can still hear you. The listening stick corrects this imbalance by letting you detect threats long before they enter your visual range. It converts ambient vibration into information and transforms you from a blind intruder into a ghost that listens deeper than any predator expects. At its core, the tool operates on the physics of contact acoustics. The shaft is designed from laminated materials that amplify faint vibrations traveling through the ground, walls, or structural remnants. When the tip touches a surface, it extracts micro-resonance that your ear alone would never register. Footsteps, shifting debris, distant metallic impacts, low-frequency rumble from movement in adjacent rooms. These become patterns you can interpret with practice. You no longer depend on open-air sound, which dissipates unpredictably. You harvest the deeper signal, the hidden transmission traveling through solid matter, predators moving 2 floors above you, scavengers creeping along a hallway you haven't entered, animals navigating collapsed corridors. They expose themselves to the stick long before they expose themselves to sight. Most survivors fail because they assume quiet zones are empty zones. They rely on eyesight and ambient noise, both compromised in a world stripped of reliable acoustic cues. Abandoned structures create dead zones where sound travels unevenly. Wind shifts distort distance. Ruins generate deceptive echoes. The noise harvest, listening stick, bypasses these distortions entirely. It does not care about air. It reads the structural truth of the environment. When you press it lightly against concrete, the stick becomes a stethoscope for the world's hidden pulse. You learn to hold your breath, align your posture, and allow the vibration to travel up your arm, into your jawline, and finally into your ear. It turns the environment into a speaking entity, and you into the only one capable of hearing its warnings. The listening process is slow, but slowness is survival. You place the stick against the floor before entering a corridor. You anchor it to a wall before turning a blind corner. You lower it onto a pipe before descending into a basement. Every contact point becomes a question. Is something moving? How large? How steady? How rhythmic? Threat detection becomes a calculation rather than a guess. A staggered vibration pattern may indicate an injured animal. A heavy, spaced rhythm signals a human burdened with gear. A rapid, irregular tremor hints at scavengers slipping through rubble. The silent operator learns these patterns with the patience of a hunter who knows mistakes are terminal. In open terrain, the listening stick shifts from a vibration harvester to an audio horizon extender. You plant it into soil, sand, or forest floor, and the ground becomes a medium that betrays distant movement. Footfalls from hundreds of meters away become detectable tremors. Herd animals transmit low-frequency pulses. Human patrols reveal themselves through rhythmic cadence long before they appear. Even the wind carries vibration across certain surfaces, letting you read atmospheric pressure changes that signal an approaching presence. But the true mastery of the listening stick emerges when paired with stillness. You become a fixed point, silent, breath-controlled, gear stabilized. The world speaks to the stick, and the stick speaks to you. You learn to interpret silence not as emptiness, but as equilibrium. When the equilibrium shifts, you already know which direction to avoid, which route to take, which path has just become lethal. Information is survival. Detection is death. The listening stick tilts the equation in your favor. It turns you into something the collapsing world does not recognize, a presence that listens deeper than the environment can whisper. And in that depth, you find the seconds you need to remain untraceable. Stealth is not the absence of sound. It is the removal of every excuse for making it. In the shattered geometry of the post-apocalyptic world, silence is not something you achieve once. It is something you maintain, relentlessly, against the physics of collapse. The 7 tools you now carry were never meant to make you invisible. They were meant to strip away the human weaknesses that the old world allowed you to ignore. Noise was once harmless. Noise was once tolerated. Noise was once a mistake you could survive. That world is gone, buried under steel and ash. And what remains is an environment that punishes sound with exact precision. Every predator, human, animal, hybrid, or starving, is attracted not to strength, not to motion, but to the simple confirmation that you exist. The soft step soul system rewrites the laws of ground contact so your footsteps stop advertising your trajectory. The dead air cloak dissolves the friction your body creates against hostile surfaces. The breath control mask neutralizes the panic inside your chest that betrays fear louder than any footfall. The frictionless carry system corrects the ancient mistake of trusting your gear to stay quiet without discipline. The Shadowline signal dampener erases the environmental alarms waiting to activate behind you. The silent terrain probe negotiates with the ground before your body commits to it. And the noise harvest listening stick turns the world's hidden vibrations into intelligence you cannot obtain through sight alone. Together, these tools form a doctrine, not to move silently, but to move without trace. Silence is only half the equation. The far more lethal half is forgettability. You do not want the environment to hear you, but more importantly, you want it to have no memory of your passage, no echoes, no disturbances, no vibrations left wandering through the ruins long after you've slipped through. Stealth is not what you do in the moment. Stealth is what you prevent from happening after the moment has passed. The hostile zone rewards the operator who understands this truth. Survival is no longer about speed, strength, or aggression. It is about staying ahead of detection. The world cannot kill what it cannot locate, cannot track, cannot conceptualize. When you adopt the full discipline of these 7 tools, you transition from a survivor into something rarer. You become unclassifiable. You become untrackable. You become an anomaly in a world that hunts patterns. In the end, stealth is not about becoming quiet. It is about becoming absent. Presence gets you killed. Absence keeps you alive. If you can master that distinction, you will move through this broken world like a shadow with no source, and shadows do not die.